Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Y'all, I have to admit something. I'm a dirty liar. I'm so sorry. So you might be wondering what did you lie about and why did you lie? Basically, in my last video, I said that the next recipe was gonna be something floral. At the time, that was the plan. It was gonna be a really good shortbread recipe, but I was finishing up testing it and I just was so bored. It is a really, really good recipe and I am gonna put it up eventually. I don't know if any of you guys are like this, but I am such a mood baker. Like, if I'm not in the mood to make something, I simply get so bored of it. Also, it was a cookie recipe. It was one cookie recipe. We just did cookies. And so I was like, well, I'm not gonna do one cookie recipe. That would be such a short video. Cream, butter, and sugar together, and there you go. That recipe is gonna come just maybe like a little bit later, and I might just put that on TikTok or something like that, which, if you're not following me, that is linked down below. I had this recipe in my arsenal and I haven't shared it and I love it so much. It's just, I think it's perfect for this time of the year. It's February, it's still kind of cold, but we're also starting to get longer days. We are starting to get like whispers and hints of springtime and like the blooms and the freshness and the fresh air and keeping the windows open and going on long walks. All of that just really inspired me to make this Frangipane and Rosehip Tart. It's super simple. It looks really intimidating, but it's actually so easy to make. And you might be saying, oh my God, Amanda, whoa, 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 whoa. You said that this recipe wasn't floral, but you just said Rosehip spread. I hear you, I understand, not related to rose. Well, like not in the way that you think. We're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that part, I promise. So basically, we're gonna go over pâte sucrée, we're gonna go over the crust and the base, we're gonna go over a frangipane, a classic regular frangipane, no tahini involved this time, and we're gonna go over the filling and the baking of this delicious tart. So I am a liar and I'm really, really sorry if you were looking forward to something floral. It is still coming, I promise, just not like right now in this moment. But hopefully you guys like this recipe enough that it makes up for it and you won't hold it against me. I'm really, really sorry. So first we are gonna go over the sucré, or the base for this crust. There's different types of tart shells and tart bases and stuff like that. There's pâte brisée, pâte sablé, pâte sucré, which has a little bit less butter than a sablé and gets mixed in a little bit differently. I use confectioner sugar in my sucré rather than granulated sugar. Some people use granulated sugar and like that works too. I just prefer to use confectioner sugar in my tart bases because when you beat butter and granulated sugar together, you run a high risk of like aerating it. Like, you know, when you cream together butter and sugar until it's light and fluffy, that's what you're doing, you're aerating it. And you really don't want to aerate this at all. So doing butter and confectioner sugar, the confectioner sugar just dissolves into the butter and becomes this really like just creamy mixture, which is perfect for this. And that's the same reason why we don't add any like egg whites or any leavening agents or anything like that. We don't want it to puff up or anything. We want it to just kind of like bake into a really basic crust. We're gonna go ahead and get started on making that. I'm gonna add my salt right now. The reason why I'm adding it now instead of with the flour is because it's not like we have that many dry ingredients to whisk together. So it's gonna not only make sure that the salt is completely and evenly distributed, but it's gonna save me a bowl, which I'm always here for. Because there's so much more butter than sugar in this, it's never really gonna get like quote unquote light and fluffy. So we're really just looking for it to be fully combined. Some people use cake or pastry flour because this is supposed to be a really tender base, which obviously is the goal. A tart shell is not supposed to be super like tough or anything. I found that if you're careful, all-purpose flour does work fine. And you know, in this economy, I'm not asking y'all to get a million different kinds of flours unless it's absolutely necessary. So AP it is. And then just gonna make sure that that is very gently mixed in. Don't really try to beat the crap out of it. Okay, so it really does end up just looking like sugar cookie dough. So Now, in theory, we could just roll this out right away and go ahead and use it, but it's so soft that it's gonna be kind of fragile to pick up and put in the Tart pan. I just refrigerate it for a little bit and then you should be safe to roll it out. I've seen some people like roll it out immediately between wax paper and then refrigerate it that way. I don't really care what you do, but I'm not getting wax paper out to do that. You can refrigerate this overnight if you want to, if you're trying to do like a make ahead option, but you might need to let it sit out for a little bit just so the butter can soften enough for you to roll it out. I'm gonna wrap this up in plastic wrap. Hello. So after all of that, our tart is ready to bake. This is like frozen solid. Hello. I just stuck this in the freezer and then turned my oven on to preheat. So it's been in the freezer for probably like 20 to 30 minutes-ish. You don't actually have to freeze it, but this does need to be really cold. So if you have more time, you can just throw it in the fridge. If you want to leave it in there for like longer or like up to overnight, you can just refrigerate it. Oftentimes with pastry crusts or pie crusts or even biscuits sometimes, the recipe will call for a chill or refrigeration or freeze of some kind. And that's because we worked the butter and warmed it up and we need to bring the temperature back down. We really want this to keep its shape as best as possible. If the butter is warm, it'll just melt immediately and you'll lose the structure and shape that you've worked so hard for. If the butter is cold, your crust is gonna set before the butter can melt and kind of move, or like that's the idea, that's the hope at least. Basically, no matter what you do, you want this to be cold. So I'm gonna do a couple of things to get it like fully ready for the oven. I'm just gonna use a fork and dock the bottom. You can do this before you freeze it. You can do it after. It doesn't really matter that much. So the holes in the bottom are gonna help to keep like really giant air pockets from forming. And then we're gonna fill it with some baking weights. I have some parchment paper here. So usually what I do I just crinkle it up a couple of times and then I can line my shell or whatever it is, and it fills like the corners very easily because it's already bent, if that makes sense. And then as far as baking weights actually go, I use dry beans. You can use a lot of different things as baking weights. I've used sugar before and I've used popcorn kernels before. I've seen some people use pennies. I don't really want to mess with that, or like washers and metal. I don't really want to mess with that. You can buy ceramic pie weights, which are really nice because they do conduct heat, so you get like an even bake on the inside. I do not want to spend money on that right now. So anyway, those would all be really good pie baking weights. And I'm making sure that it's full to the top and in all of the corners. The weights are basically gonna help to hold the sides up while it's baking so they don't slump down. Keep the bottom down if any air bubbles form so they don't kind of like puff up. We're gonna bake this for a little bit at a higher temperature just to get the edges and everything set, and then we're gonna remove the baking beans and bake it for just a couple minutes longer. We're not fully pre-baking this, we're only par baking this because it's gonna go back into the oven. If you don't pre-bake it at all, you run the risk of like a raw, soggy crust on the bottom. After this gets baked, we're gonna let it cool completely. I'm gonna meet you back over here so that we can make the frangipane and assemble this tart. So this is our, oh my god, I just flicked that all over me. So this is our almond cream, or our Frangipane, that we're going to be using for this tart. Frangipane at its core is like butter, sugar, eggs, and almond flour. People use it as fillings for croissants or breads or things like that, or they use it in tarts like we're going to today. It's really customizable based on what you're going to be doing with it. So maybe if you're putting it in something where it needs to hold its shape a little bit more, like a filling for a croissant, you want it to not leak so much, maybe you'd put a little bit more flour in there or a little bit less egg. Maybe you're putting it in a tart like we are today, and you kind of want it to be looser so that it spreads out evenly, and it doesn't really matter if it's stiff or not because it's going to be contained in a crust. So that's why there's Frangipane, but different people's Frangipane might look different depending on what they're using it for. I really do like this Frangipane as like a filling for things. It's really nice and buttery and rich. It sets up really, really well in this tart, but it doesn't get too dry or too stodgy or anything like that. It also doesn't have to be almond. You can swap out for pistachio. I've seen that, that's really good. Or you can do like a tahini Frangipane like I did with the peach brioche buns. So it's really super customizable. You can do a lot with it, and I love it. So our shell is out of the oven. I definitely should have pulled this like 2 minutes sooner. It got a little bit too dark on the edges. Obviously this isn't too dark, but because it's going back in the oven, it's gonna brown a little bit more, which is totally fine. That just means that I'm gonna cover it with foil a little bit sooner than I normally would. Also, I just wanna point out, you can barely even tell that it broke, or that I patched it all up. That's the beauty of pastry, isn't it? You really can just kind of go in and fix your mistakes. So because the pie beans went all the way up to the top and they were super packed in there, and we baked at a high temperature, so my crust did not shrink down the sides at all, which I'm super, super happy with. I will say that sometimes my crust does shrink. It does happen. Sometimes after I pull the beans out and before I put it back into the oven, I do just kind of like coax the crust back up to the sides because it is soft at that point, and I keep a little bit of extra like pastry, like the cutoff of the dough, to patch up anything that I need to before it goes back into the oven. So it's super, super forgiving and super easy to work with and super easy to use. So because this is cooled off now and I can hold this and I'm not gonna hurt myself by like filling it in, we're gonna go ahead and fill it in with our jam and with our Frangipane. And I'm really, really excited to talk to you guys about the filling because we're using an ingredient that I think is woefully underrepresented. I think that it needs to be more of a widespread, wide used ingredient in this country, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. So without further ado, here is my pitch to you on why you should be using Rosehip jam. Okay, so I'm using Rosehip spread in this recipe. You know how like lingonberry jam got really popular because of IKEA, and like people know what it is, but you don't really find it everywhere, and it's kind of like a niche product? That's what I want to do for Rosehip jam. I don't need it to be the next like grape jelly, but I need it to be more accessible in America so that I can go to some kind of grocery store and pick it up. What is like Rosehip spread? Rosehip spread is super, super popular in Europe. That's how I know about it. We used it every single year for our Christmas cookies. It's my mom's favorite like fruit spread type thing. Despite the name, it is not rose flavored at all. Like it doesn't smell like rose and it doesn't taste like rose. So if you're sensitive to like perfumey things, you're in luck because this really doesn't smell or taste like rose like at all. Rose hips are a berry that are a byproduct of certain types of rose plants. They're like tiny, small, little reddish pink buds. I don't know specifically which rose plants or if it's all rose plants, I'm not really sure, but it grows wild in like so many countries, and I think it even grows wild in certain states in the US, but people don't really know what they are or that they're edible. You would see rosehip oil, rosehip extract, or something like that in a lot of teas or skincare. It does have a lot of really good benefits for your skin and for your body. It's really rich in antioxidants and vitamin C, and it makes a really, really tasty like preserved spread. As far as brands go, unfortunately, the most consistent place that I found it is Amazon. I know, I'm not happy about it either. World Market doesn't even sell it, which is very frustrating. I would hope that out of any place, World Market would sell it. I've also had luck at a grocery store called Lidl, which is kind of like Aldi, but it's only in certain states. If you live in any of these states, first of all, you're lucky and I hate you. But second of all, whenever they have their like German week, they will probably have Rosehip spread. But if you're getting it online, I've used many brands and had luck with a lot of them. So I've used this brand before. This is the brand that I got shipped to me from Germany, so I don't even know if you can find it in the States, but this is what I used for the video today. And then this one is a really common brand. I use the jar for plant propagation, so this is really awkward, but this one is really common and really popular also. Rosehip spread is great because it is sweet and tart. It's got a little bit of that zing, that kind of like sour note to it that is lovely. There's no seeds in it. It doesn't have like a chunky like preservative texture to it. So there's a ton of applications. It's very smooth, easy to work with and easy to use. We use it all the time for tarts like this. We use it for cookie sandwiches, like in between like shortbread or sugar cookies. You can use it in cakes. I love it really on toast with like cream cheese, just regularly. Every single person that I give some Rosehip spread to, they love it and they ask me where I've got it. I really think that if more people know about it, then more people will ask for it, and then we can finally get it readily in the United States. So I've now made it my life's mission to make sure that people know about this and like it so that I can go to the store and just pick it up rather than specialty ordering it online. This is all selfish. This is purely for my own sake. You guys are just also going to benefit from it. So that's my spiel on Rosehip. The tart can take up to 45 minutes to bake and might puff up a little bit, but it will kind of flatten out as it cools. We want to make sure that it does cook all the way through and doesn't just set on the outside. So this tart does kind of bake low and slow. So that is all that I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, sorry for lying, but I hope that this recipe was worth it. I hope at the very least this video and this recipe inspires you to try something new, whether it be the Rosehip spread or just this tart and Frangipane in general. If I didn't say this earlier, you don't have to use Rosehip spread in this tart. This is pretty much a Bakewell tart, which is a classic British dessert, and I believe classically that is raspberry or cherry. Either of those would be great uses for this tart. You can also use something like plum or blackberry if you still want to do something kind of different. Obviously, I want everyone to try Rosehip spread, but it is not a very accessible ingredient. I will leave links down below where you can find it online, but maybe kind of look around in your community, and if you live near like a European specialty store, they might have it potentially. I am so excited with how this recipe turned out. I love a Frangipane tart. I love almond in general, and this Frangipane is perfect for this recipe. It sets really well, but it's not super dry or stiff. It just has such a great moist texture. The sucre is just so buttery and delicious, and the frangipane is so buttery and smooth and delicious. And then you get like a nice line of the jam in the bottom that just kind of breaks it up and makes it a really, really nicely balanced tart. I think it's so, so good, and I cannot sing its praises enough. I really, really hope that you guys give this recipe a try. I don't think this video is going up before Valentine's Day. I think it's coming up right after Valentine's Day, unfortunately. But any kind of Galentine's or spring celebration that you do, this tart is perfect. It is begging to be the centerpiece of somebody's dinner party. If you guys have any recipes that you want to see from me in the future, any comments, concerns, recommendations, requests, you can find me on all my social medias, which I'll link down below. You can also leave a comment on this video here and let me know what you want to see, and I will do my best to make it happen. Obviously, my schedule can change at the turn of a dime, at the drop of a hat, at the turn of a... I don't really know what the phrase is. My schedule can change very easily. So if there's something that you want to see, definitely let me know and I'll do my best to make it happen. The next video, I swear to God, I'm not lying about, because this one is set in stone. Because March is my birthday month, we always do some kind of cake in March. And so next month is going to be a cake that I have been craving for months. It's super delicious and super fun, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that or any of the other videos and recipes that I put out. So again, thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you are all happy and safe wherever you are in the world, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye! That could have been so bad. So, without... Guster is sleeping and I just want to eat him. I love him so much.